Hey, everybody, and welcome. My name is Rob Phelan, also known as the FI Educator Online, and we are talking about food budgets today. Now, if you didn't know, which some of you as teenagers might not know, food is one of the big three when it comes to your everyday expenses, when it comes to budgeting. So like when I'm making my plan with my wife each month for how much we're going to spend this coming month, food is up there almost as much as our mortgage at this point in terms of our costs. So it's one of the biggest rocks that you can attack when it comes to managing your finances. So get it right. Money starts to feel a little bit easier. Get it wrong, and it can really start running away from you pretty quickly. So we've got a guest today, Perez, who is the author of Money for Change. She's a financial coach, and she had a $30,000 debt payoff journey, which is how she kind of got her foot into the financial world in the first place. She's talking to us today about how do we kind of manage this food part of our budget from a money perspective, from a health perspective, from goals perspective. We're going to talk about it all today. Kara, how are you doing?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for having me.
Of course. It's great to see you here. Kara has a wonderful Instagram channel where you can learn a lot about money as well as about food. So that's the @WeBravelyGo. So your blog is called Bravely Go, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. So I kind of hinted at the 30,000 debt payoff journey, but can you tell us a little bit more about that and how you kind of got into finance in the first place?
Yes. So I graduated college in 2011 and I had to take out student loans to go to college, like many people. And when I graduated, it wasn't technically the Great Recession, but I like to call it the aftermath. And jobs are still fairly scarce. And we had shifted as a country really hard into the gig economy. So there were jobs available, but they didn't offer benefits or they were hourly. And I could not for the life of me find a full-time salaried position. So I just started side hustling. I was sort of like, look, I can keep applying to these jobs that keep rejecting me, or I can just take what comes my way because I have these student loans and I had to pay rent and car insurance and all of the adult costs, which really hits you hard in your early 20s. I think it's very easy to realize, or rather, I think it's very easy to not realize how much things cost and then you're responsible for them. And you're like, wait a second. Like having to buy my first trash can, I was like, why are these so expensive?
I know we were
um,
looking at throw pillows for couches. And like, why are these things like $30 minimum for a pillow? But yes,
yes.
carry on with unnecessary, over expensive things.
So I just really was slammed hard by adulthood and really struggling to find income. So my student loans were, after rent, my biggest expense. And I just kind of honed in on those. And really and truly, the only thought in my brain was, if I can eliminate my student loans, my life will be better. Like, I was not thinking, oh, let me, financially design my life for the next 3 decades. Let me get into financial independence. I literally just wanted to eliminate that, $450 cost every single month from my budget. So I started side hustling. I worked 5 different part-time jobs to pay off my student loans. I did it predominantly in a 10-month sprint. And it was bananas, and I don't really recommend that, but it was effective. It did work. And I started blogging old school style about that. That blog gained some traction. I ended up selling it, and I was living in Austin, Texas at the time. And I realized I loved talking about money. I had such a passion for this, and I wanted to start doing events in person because I am an extrovert. So I did events for a few years. Enter COVID, we shifted totally online, but now it's my full-time business is financial education.
That's awesome. Like that, again, this happens for a lot of people. Like we dig this hole for ourselves. We have an crap insert word moment where we're like, this is not working, or this feels really pressured, huge weight on your shoulders. Like the money is either not there or you're barely making it to the end of the month.
Mm-hmm.
And debt is a huge one to tackle first. So like student loans, credit cards, auto loans, those are the ones you can be like, okay, if this is gone, then suddenly I free up X number of dollars each month. And that can feel like a huge weight is lifted. And then I think for a lot of people, once you've hit that point and you freed up the money, then maybe we coast and we're like, okay, things are comfortable, they're fine, we can continue with life as is. Or we go that step further and we start finding things like financial independence, where you're like, hold on, if I keep doing this and I keep optimizing my finances, I start investing, I start saving more, I get an emergency fund, which means that stress level goes down even further.
Mm-hmm.
I start freeing up more cash that I can start putting towards other things that I really want to do. And you really start designing the life that you want. So it's really cool to see that progression for you from that kind of like, yeah, I just want this debt gone to, well, no, now I'm going to show everyone else how to do better with their finances. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real journey.
All right, so let's dive into the the meat and potatoes, pun intended, of this talk. So we're going to talk about food. Food, really big expense for most people, and for you guys watching, so high school students, you're going to graduate into a world where the cost of stuff is quite high at the moment, and inflation, so the cost of goods and services as they go up over time, is quite high. So it's usually measured by a percentage. That percentage has been quite high for a couple of years now. So things have been getting more and more expensive year over year. Salaries and wages, on the other hand, have not been going up by the same amount, which is what they would ideally do in an ideal world, is that salaries and costs of living would go up around the same rate. So you can basically afford the same stuff each year as long as your salary climbs. It hasn't been happening. So things are more expensive now than they ever were. Can you give us a little bit of like background, like why food in particular is so expensive right now?
Yeah, so it's a combination of things, sort of like very big picture, the way that we grow and produce food, whether that's vegetables, whether that's meat, has been undergoing some environmental challenges. So there's like soil issues in parts of the Midwest, which is where we grow a ton of our food. California also grows a ton of food, and they've been hit with wildfires predominantly, but also water issues. So that is kind of hitting production. But additionally, we live in a global world. And so, for example, the United States gets a lot of our shrimp from China. So you're not eating, like if you go out to eat in Connecticut and you're on the coast and you're thinking, oh, the shrimp obviously comes from the waters off of the Connecticut coast. That's probably not true. Those shrimp come from China. And as we enter into a trade war with China via the tariffs, tariffs are a fee that the importer pays. So if the restaurant is importing shrimp from another country, the restaurant is going to pay that fee imposed by the tariff. That means they have to charge more for the food that you're eating at the restaurant. And that's true of grocery stores as well. If you're buying shrimp at like here we have Market Basket, in Texas they have HEB and Sprouts, whatever your family
Kroger's,
gets.
Walmart, Wegmans, yeah,
Exactly,
all
all
of
the
them, yeah.
places. So that's also impacting like item by item prices. And just in general, as you mentioned, like cost of living, that's a phrase that economists use and we use a lot in the personal finance world, is going up. So if the lease that Walmart is paying at their store goes up, they need to make up that cost and they pass that on to the consumer. So as things like housing, gas, utilities get more expensive, stores also experience those increases and they pass that on to customers to make up the difference.
Yeah. So we have the normal, just like things getting more expensive each year. And that's an ideal situation for an economy. It's a very actually interesting thing to look at, like why we want a small amount of inflation every year. There's a really good YouTube on that video on that if you want to search for it. And I'll put in the link for this video as well, which is like why inflation is good. And it's supposed to be like somewhere down around like 2 to 3% inflation. That's an ideal one, but it's been much higher recently. And, not to date the video too much, but as you said, right now, like we are having a lot of tariffs. So these taxes being imposed on goods coming in. And in particular, we're doing what we call a trade war, where essentially we're trading tariffs with other countries to try and find the deal, the point at which everyone's like, okay, like this is an acceptable amount. Because say like you are China and you're exporting your shrimp to the US, high tariffs on your stuff means less people are going to buy it because they just simply can't afford it. So that means your income is going to go down. So countries don't particularly want to be taxed at a higher rate, which is why you get things like trading blocks in the first place, where countries are just like, yeah, we're going to freely trade between each other, or we've got these fixed deals. So food, we import a lot of our food from outside of the US. And sometimes you like track where it goes, and it might be produced in South America, packaged in Asia, and then shipped finally back to the US. Like our food is very global. So you might be seeing right now in the grocery stores, prices going up. And even in my grocery store, there are signs saying like, hey, right now our prices are even higher than normal because we're paying these extra tariffs on stuff that we're importing. So just so you know. So what are we going to do about this? Like, what's the plan here? How do we, as new graduates of high school, where we have probably the lowest income we're ever going to have, unless we choose to decrease our income. Like, you should start probably at your lowest salary when you graduate. Your food intake is not going to change that much over your course, your lifespan. So proportionally, you're going to spend more of your income now on food, housing, transportation than you hopefully will in the future. So how do we handle this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And for everyone watching, I really encourage you to think of it in two ways. Think of approaching food not just as a source of fuel, right? But also as a fun experience, right? Like food is delicious. Who doesn't love eating, right? And so I think kind of leaning into that second of eating as experience is a really good place to start. And I encourage everyone to learn how to cook. I learned how to cook in my late 20s, and I'm so grateful for that. But I wish I had learned earlier. I thought that it was going to be hard or scary, or there was like, what if I burned myself? Like, what if I got injured in the kitchen? Now I've been cooking. My partner and I eat probably 95% of our monthly meals at home. We do not go out to eat very often. And that's mostly because I have Crohn's disease and there's a lot of foods I can't eat. So we save a lot of money that way, but I would not recommend getting a GI disease as a budgeting tactic.
No, it doesn't usually make things cheaper.
Yeah. But learning how to cook is really going to serve you, because if you're eating out or if you're door dashing or, Instacarting in a lot of individual meals, you're going to be paying not just the inflated restaurant cost because somebody cooked that for you. So like all restaurants are generally more expensive than eating at home because you're paying for the labor and the food, but you're also paying that delivery fee and you're also paying that app fee. So what should have been $8 tacos now are $14 tacos. So being aware of that and saying, I'm going to learn how to make my favorite tacos at home. I'm going to see cooking as a life skill and as something that I can do with friends. I can do with my boyfriend. I can do with my girlfriend. I can do with my mom. Like, this is quality time I can spend with people. I can learn a skill and I can save money. It's kind of the trifecta that we're going for.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. I really enjoy cooking. My wife and I enjoy it too. It's a fun activity to do together, which is always nice as well. So you do have that entertainment, relationship building value that can come from it too. But when we think about okay, we kind of skipped ahead a little bit. Like, how much of our take home pay, so our disposable income, should we be allocating towards food? And then let's maybe talk about trimming it down as well.
Yeah. So this is always this is always a bit of a wiggle room area because food costs different amounts in different parts of the country. Different food items are more expensive than others, right? Like single serving convenience food. So if you're getting like those little packets of like Cheetos, the snack size, those are more expensive than the bigger size, generally speaking. So there's an amount of variables that we have to kind of embrace and accept. And so when you're sitting down, if you're trying to do a budget or you're trying to just do some simple math, like give yourself a little bit of grace and a little bit of wiggle room, especially if you're just learning about this stuff. Certainly as financial educators, I always tell people, like, I don't expect you to be perfect. You just have to try. And the more you try, the more you'll learn. So coming back to how do we set a budget? So I always like to look at where we've been and then try to change where we're going. So if you're living at home with your parents, a great conversation to have with them is like, how much are we spending on food, mom and dad, right? Like, what is the household budget for this? And going to the store with them and seeing how much individual items cost and then tracking that. So now you have data. And if you're like, oh, for a family of 4, we're spending $1,200. We want to get that down to $1,000 even. Now we start talking about, okay, instead of buying brand name, let's buy store brand. Let's use coupons. Let's shop the sales. Let's shop in season produce. That's always going to be cheaper than out of season produce. And you can look that up online, like what's in season in May, what's in season in September. Because it's what is sort of naturally growing. It doesn't have to be shipped in from somewhere else, right? So once you know your numbers, you can work on changing those numbers. And I would say with food, the most important thing is just to remain flexible. And if there's a new vegetable that you've never tried before, but it's on super discount, try that out. Throw it in a stir fry and see if you like it. Again, food is delicious. Food is fun. So really making part of the really making the experience of trying something new part of your budgeting will go a really long way.
Yeah. And I think making it a game for yourself is really fun too. So like we're trying new things. I remember I had a roommate once, and she and her partner would like every week be like, we have to try something brand new that we've never had before. So they would like comb through the grocery store for like the weirdest looking fruit or veg they've never had before, figure out how to cook it and put it in. And most of the time they're like, nah, this wasn't for me. But sometimes they're like, oh, this was great. But in terms of like how much to spend, and this is sometimes like the question I get is like, well, I make $1,000 a month take home. Like, how much should I be spending on food? General consensus I find online is somewhere between 10 to 15% of your take home pay, which sounds great when you like say, okay, there's a slice of a pie, like 10%, so that's $100, and then you're like, wait, $100 a month? That does not go very far. Like 100. Like I think I saw you do a post recently about like what was $150 worth of groceries look like for you, and it barely took up like a corner of a table. So it's hard, guys. And like I said before, like in the beginning, this is going to take up probably more of your income than it will later on. That's the hope. Like your income will keep going up. You're going to continue eating mostly the same stuff. And you'll notice that less and less and less of your income goes towards your food. But yeah, in the beginning, like 10 to 15% is roughly what we should be aiming for. I would find my wife and I are closer to 30% because food is something we really value, particularly like healthy stuff. So like we buy a lot of organic, we eat a lot of fresh stuff, we cook a lot at home. So we made the conscious decision like to overspend in this category, to underspend in others. So like our entertainment category is much smaller. We have a 5-year-old, so we don't go anywhere. Least of all restaurants, because sitting in a restaurant for more than 5 minutes is a tough ask for a 5-year-old right now. So that might be something that you think about as well. Is like, okay, how much do I want to spend on food? And then is it important to me or not? So like clearly Kara and I are both foodies, but if food is not important to you and you're like, okay, this is just a source of sustenance, like just keep it simple, like you might be able to spend a lot less.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go into the strategies for reducing. So we talked about buying what's in season, trying to think about maybe what is locally produced versus what's being imported. What else do you got?
Yeah. So there are discount grocery stores, right? Like Aldi is a discount grocery store that's going to be cheaper than Whole Foods. So also looking to shop at those discount stores, utilizing in-store sales and coupons. So often the stores themselves will say like, oh, it's 20% off, Pop-Tarts. But then also there are what we call manufacturer coupons. So that's where Pop-Tart, the company, will have coupons that are different from the in-store ones. And sometimes you can combine those. So understanding your local store coupon policy. And there's a lot of resources out there on couponing, which is great, especially on social media. If you just type that into TikTok, people take you on their couponing journey, like in store. It's amazing. I've learned a lot from that. And I will share. So my partner and I, it's just two of us in our household, and we have a $400 a month grocery budget. So $100 a week. And I do all the grocery shopping in our household, and I never go to the store without a list. Especially I build my list off of looking at what I already have. Because if you just go in blind and you don't know if you already have, say you want to make chili and you don't know that you have 3 cans of beans at home. So you buy 3 cans of beans. Now you have, those beans will keep, I want to say, but like, you've overspent simply because you didn't check in before you left. So spend literally 5 minutes, open the fridge, scan through it, open the pantry, scan through it. Oh, we don't have any carrots. We do have a bag of onions, so I don't need to get that. All right. I don't need to get onions. So building that list off of what you already have and having some ideas for the meals you want to make. So I always know that I'm going to make, we eat very differently, my partner and I, because he doesn't have Crohn's disease. So shout out him, I guess. But I know he's going to meal prep 2 meals for himself for the week, and I'm going to meal prep 2 meals for myself. So I know what those meals are going in. And then I know what I need to buy, and I know what I have at home. And honestly, that's going to be the biggest price saver I have found is simply knowing what you need and what you don't. Now, I will say, grocery stores are literally designed to get you to spend more money. So when you walk in, right, like what's the first thing you see? It's the checkout area that has like candy and stuff, right? And they make you walk all the way to the back to get to the basics like bread and milk and eggs. And that's by design. They want you to walk past everything they have for sale. So you have to see it twice, when you go to the back and then when you come back up to the front, because you're more likely to impulse buy if something is put in front of your face. So that's why having that list when you go in is really so crucial, because hey, nope, I'm gonna put my blockers on.
Or if you ever wondered why they like shuffle the order of the store, like that's another reason. It's just to make it a new maze that you have to find your way through and walk past all their stuff again. Yes. So you can't just skip to the things you want. Yep.
Exactly. So you are up a little bit against that. And, sometimes they have samples they're trying to get you with. And like, I love a sample, don't get me wrong. But if it's a product I wasn't planning on buying, it's remembering like, okay, I don't actually need this, or what do I have at home that can replicate this, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, the meal plan is huge. I grew up in a household where like my parents didn't meal plan. It was kind of like, I think my mom would go to the grocery store. She would buy like roughly the same stuff every week and then would just sort of make it up every night, like what she was going to do. Yeah. But what ends up happening is you end up with a lot of waste at the end of the week. Things that go off, that don't get used because there was no plan. So like you do have a well-stocked fridge, you have enough to make what you want, but there's so much that doesn't get used and ends up in the landfill, trash, compost, whatever it is. And that's a lot of dollars that are being thrown away. And I think when I was growing up, maybe that wasn't as big a deal because food wasn't as proportionally expensive. But now my wife and I are like, no, we can't do that. So we started meal planning. We sit down on Sunday usually, and just really quick, we're like, what meals we want to make this week? Great. Let's populate our grocery list. And when I go grocery shopping, like I've got my list. And yeah, you avoid the temptations, the impulse buys. Because it's hard sometimes, especially if you shop hungry. That's my other tip. Don't shop hungry. But
never shop hungry. That has gotten me more than once, I'll admit.
Or cranky, or like not in a good mindset. Like sometimes food is like our source of feeling better. And like sometimes that's the other thing you want to watch out for.
Totally.
So how are your emotions influencing your purchasing? But yeah, the meal plan, big. So what are you having for breakfast, lunch, dinner? What snacks do you want in the house? All gets populated into your list. And then that's what you go buy. I've actually found during COVID when we weren't going to the grocery store, we were doing pickup, so curbside pickup. Even though you have the markup for curbside pickup, we were sometimes spending less because we weren't actually walking through the aisles. Yes. You had to think of it ahead of time and buy it that way. So that could be a way to save you money and time if you're okay with that little markup. Just let somebody else shop the shelves for you, put it in a cart, you pick it up, and there's your groceries for the week.
100%. And something else I will say, so I share my monthly spending on my Instagram. So if you're interested in seeing, check it out. And I just shared my April spending, and my grocery budget, I'm using air quotes, was way over. So my partner and I spent as a household, I think in April, we spent like $560 or something, which is obviously way over our $400 budget. Or actually, hold on, let me pull up the math. I'm like, wait a second. Let me do this math. So we spent $536. I transposed my numbers here at the grocery store in April, but $150 of that was medicine because we both got bronchitis in April and we needed to get medicine. And I noticed like we don't have Band-Aids, we don't have Neosporin, like there's a bunch of stuff we didn't have. So when I subtract that $150 out, we actually spent $386 on food, right? Which is under budget. So I feel really good about that. I bring this up because you may buy something at the grocery store that's not exactly food, right? A lot of us get toilet paper or paper towels or vitamins, or in my case, medicine. And you can separate that out in your budget. So that's what I did. I have now a column in my budget for medicine that I put that $150 in. So my groceries is actually reflected as that $386.
Yeah. So the grocery store, like they're supposed to be like a one place catches all. They want your business. They want your money. And if you're in a grocery store and they've got the other stuff you need, I mean, Target and Walmart are examples of this where like they just have everything. So from clothing to food, like they've got it all. The whole point is that it's a one-stop shop and you stay for the convenience and you will pay and spend your money there versus going to 2 different stores or 3 different stores. So when you are budgeting, thinking about, well, how much is going towards food, what's going towards clothing, what's going towards household expenses like cleaning products, what's going towards medicine or health related things. And that can sometimes help you a little bit, or you just lump it all into your grocery budget, knowing that it's going to include more than just food. I think that's kind of how ours ends up, is that like we beef up our grocery store budget because we know there's a little bit more in there too.
You can keep it simple that way.
Okay, so if we are meal planning and we want to reduce the cost of our meal plan, so like we're being strategic about what we're picking. We said picking seasonal things, great idea. Checking ahead of time, so store websites, see if they put out a publication like a weekly newsletter or something like that says, hey, this is what's on sale this week. You can make sure you're including that in your recipes. What else would we do to kind of keep that meal plan cost low?
Yeah, it's all going to really come down to where you're shopping and what you're buying. So again, doing that discount grocery store, but then understanding that, steak costs more than chicken breast, right? Or that those individually packaged foods are more expensive than the bulk. And so what you want to do is become a smart shopper. And so what I like to do is I have a list of kind of basic foods that I know my partner and I both like and that we can turn into many dishes. So in his case, he loves lentils. Lentils are really high in protein and they're really cheap. They're one of the cheapest foods at the grocery store. You can put them in soups. You can make just lentil dishes. You can add them to things like tacos. You can even mix lentils with something like ground beef so that you use less beef, but you're still having this. Lentils have a bit of a meaty flavor. So they are a really, really powerful budget food because they're incredibly versatile and they're cheap. Something like white rice, other types of beans, black beans, pinto beans, et cetera, those in my house form the base of a lot of the meals we eat. So what you want to do is find the equivalent. And again, we all eat differently. We all have different bodies. You may not be able to eat exactly the same way I eat. That's fine. But you want to find what your base is, and then you want to find cheaper alternatives for that. So if you're like, we're a steak and potatoes household. Okay. So maybe you were eating steak twice a week instead of 5 days a week. And then we are eating, the lentils, or we're doing ground beef mixed with the lentils so that we're stretching those dollars further. And then also asking yourself, what's realistic for me to make and what am I going to need to buy? So I don't drink dairy milk because it doesn't agree with my stomach. You can make your own oat milk. I'm never going to do that. And and I just need to be honest, like some people are out there making their own oat milk. It's never going to be me.
No, or your own yogurt or like something like that. Like, no, that's the store-bought item for me.
Exactly. And so, but that's fine because I can pay a little extra for the oat milk because I'm saving on things like the lentils. And so understanding how your budget is really its own ecosystem. And so if you get the lentils, if I get a pound of lentils for $1.12 as opposed to buying a bunch of red meat for $7 and a pound of red meat for $7, I can take that savings of $6 and put it towards my oat milk, right? So I'm still kind of like coming out even, but I'm getting more for the same amount of money.
Notice how that theme of priority-based spending is coming up, everyone. So what do you really want? What do you care about? Make room for that at the expense of other stuff that you don't care about.
Yes.
And I do want to talk a little bit more about the time versus money side of things. We'll do that in a little bit. But as you're building this meal plan, what are your staples that are cheap? So rice, beans, those are big ones. In terms of fruits, like bananas are much cheaper than some of the other ones you can buy. Can you buy vegetables fresh versus canned or frozen? So frozen, sometimes you get the same health benefits, but not as expensive as buying fresh, and it will last longer for you as well. So you're not wasting as much. What can you buy in bulk versus you have to buy singly? So you were talking about steak, if you're obsessed with having steak, which we rarely ever splurge on steak, but could you go to a local farmer and get an entire cow cut up for you? You have a big deep freezer and you store it that way. That's a much cheaper way than buying a single piece of steak. So things that you can buy in bulk are going to be cheaper. So the cost per unit goes down, and comparing cost per unit is a huge way to save some money and see like, is it worth buying bigger amounts or not? It's why places like Costco can be so helpful if you can control yourself going into a Costco.
Yes.
How many of you have parents who are like, you go to Costco to buy one thing and you come out with $200 worth of stuff? Like, it happens. It's designed to happen that way. Like, that's the thing, guys. They're all trying to sell us more stuff than we actually want. So, can you have that plan of like, okay, what can I buy in bulk that will keep? So like the rice will keep, the dried beans will keep, or cans will keep. What can be frozen? I like bulk making meals too. So like, what are the meals that you can make a lot of and that will freeze or will keep for an entire week? So like your soups that you can freeze, your anything that's kind of in a liquid typically will freeze well. Or like lasagnas. I mean, you can make a big sheet lasagna, cut it up into pieces, freeze it. Like, those are ones that are great for your budget, because something like lasagna, like pasta is cheap, sauce is cheap, cheese is not too bad. And then, you're putting maybe a ground beef, ground turkey, ground chicken in there. And those are not the most expensive meats you can have. So like, those are the kinds of meals that we build our budget around. And we might have one night where we're like, let's get some salmon, but we're going to go vegetarian on another meal to kind of balance that out.
100%. I and my partner and I eat vegetarian breakfast and lunches every single day. And the majority of our dinners are vegetarian, but we eat poultry, chicken and turkey predominantly. And so, yeah, simply avoiding red meat altogether does save us a lot of money. I know not everyone wants to make that choice. So that's fine. I'm just saying from a numbers perspective.
Yep.
And the freezing, there's so much that can be frozen, and that really saves you so much time. So if you can devote, 2 hours on a Sunday or a Saturday to going grocery shopping for an hour and then prepping for an hour, you can make everything from like breakfast burritos, scrambled eggs, some potatoes, and you can wrap them in a tortilla, stick them in the freezer for that week. As you mentioned, buying like bulk meat. Soups do freeze very, very well, but there's so many things. And then you just pull them out and you're like, oh, I don't have to cook again. Amazing. It's one of my favorite parts of being an adult, honestly, is meal prepping. I think of it as a gift to my future self every time I do it. Like, I do it on Sundays and I just think Wednesday Kara is so happy that Sunday Kara is doing this.
Yeah. So we're going to come back with a couple more strategies in a minute, because there are some great ones I think that we'll just think about as we go as well. Like, we've had our ideas beforehand, but they just kind of keep popping up as we do this. Let's do our trivia. So for those of you not familiar, we do a trivia section every time we have one of our guest speakers. On the back of your reflection sheet that should have come with this, that hopefully you've got in front of you, there's a place at the back to put your trivia answer. And I'm going to ask Kara her guess as well. It's usually a number where you have to stay under and get as close to it as you can without going over. All right, it's Cinco de Mayo, so let's see what our Cinco de Mayo trivia is. All right, so Cinco de Mayo, traditionally Mexican food being made, lots of avocados sold. There's more avocados sold in this 2-week period before the 5th of May than I think in any other period of the year. So how many millions of pounds of avocado are sold in the 2 weeks before May 5th? And this is based on 2024 numbers. So best guess, put it down without going over. And then within your class, maybe see like who got the closest. So I'll ask Kara her guess in a little bit later when I give you guys the answer. But so thinking about our strategies, is there another one that you're like, yes, this is something that we really need to think about as we plan our meals out or as we shop at the grocery store?
I wanted to go back to what you were saying about food waste. So the United States as a country wastes about 30% of the food that we grow. So some of that is at the industrial level. So it's not just individuals, but a lot of it is restaurants and individuals. So what I think works really well to counteract that is brutal honesty. Sometimes we shop for the person we want to be, not the person we are. And you see this a lot around vegetables. I would say especially around summertime, there's a lot of messaging around bodies and weight in the warmer months, and people might be saying like, I'm going to eat more kale. But if you hate kale, like, don't buy it. Or if you're not excited about the kale, it may be fine, but if you're not excited about eating it, don't buy it, because that really is just throwing away dollars if you don't end up eating it. And it's just, now you have to toss that in the trash. It's not good for the environment. So I think being honest with yourself about what you like, what you'll actually eat, and what you have time to cook. We just spoke a lot about meal prepping, but if you're working a summer job, maybe you're getting ready to go to college, you've got orientation, you're seeing a lot of friends. Maybe you don't have time to do deep meal prepping the way that it kind of sounds like Rob and I are doing at home. That's totally fine. Be honest about that so that you're not buying 15 pounds of sweet potatoes thinking, I'm going to bake all of these. It's okay if you don't do that, but be honest.
Yeah, it's that honesty with yourself, super important. I can personally vouch for how many times we've thrown celery out being like, yeah, like, well, we're going to snack on celery this week instead of, chips or whatever it's going to be. But it's important to try these things and see, like, is it going to work for you or not? Habit building, like, how do you replace one habit with another? So those are all great things to tie in with food as well, if you want to make a change. But certainly make sure that's something that you want to do and not something that you feel pressured to do. I want to come back to the time versus money conversation, because we could all dig up our backyards. We could plant all the vegetables and fruits and be like, we are going to live off the land and stop paying for things in the grocery stores. We're going to have chickens in the back. Like, you could try and create your own self-sustaining place, which for some people, that is the goal in life. So, like, don't put it down in any way. But, living in a townhouse for myself, that's something that's not feasible for my wife and I right now. Like, you can't have chickens in your backyard when you're in a townhouse. So finding that balance between what you're willing to spend money for the convenience and then what you're going to do yourself is a big thing. Some things you could do, you could grow your own herbs, like put them in a little planter box out in your backyard. And like, that very quickly will save you $1 to $2 every time you go to the grocery store. It's like, I will go and I will buy parsley and I get this huge bunch of parsley and I really just wanted a couple of sprigs. Like, can I just cut it off and weigh that? No, you have to buy like a big bunch of it. Like, nobody needs that much. Same thing with kale. For some reason, kale comes in huge quantities. So could you do something like that to save yourself a couple of dollars? Buying, I feel like watermelon is another big one. Like, you buy a big watermelon, like full thing, not cut up, it might cost you like $4. You buy a quarter of a watermelon that's been sliced up for you, it might be $10. Like, the convenience of having somebody cut it up for you is going to actually add to a lot of the cost as well. So can you do some of that yourself? Or is this too much of a pain and it's worth paying somebody else to do this for me to save me the time? Where do you fall in that kind of conversation?
I'm definitely more of a DIY person. One of my biggest cost savers is I don't buy the pre-cut vegetables. No shade to people who do. I just don't do that because the markup is outrageous in my opinion, and I have the time, and I know that about my schedule and about my lifestyle and myself. Again, not everyone has to do it exactly the way I do it, but I do find that the more you can DIY, the more you'll see larger savings. But as we're talking about this, everyone listening, this is new. So we've thrown out a lot of strategies and a lot of ideas. So try something. I like to give something 2 weeks. And then if I find that it's stressing me out more or it's just not working, I'll put it down and I'll try something else. So give it a real effort. Don't just try it one day and then say, this will never work. Give it a real effort, at least 2 weeks. And then be open to changing things and notice like what's working for you, what's not.
Yeah. Like, one example for us is like, we will buy still a prepackaged thing, but of green beans. We'll buy the trimmed green beans because it saves me like 10 minutes of like actually cutting the ends off these things. I can just open it, dress it, whatever I'm doing, roast it, and like, it's good to go. And for my wife and I, we're like, okay, this was worth the 10 to 15 minutes saved for the 50 cents. That was a difference between buying it loose versus in this bag. So like, look at the price difference and be like, is it worth it to you or not? Now, as you elevate your FI journey, this could become a very different conversation. So like, the question of eating out versus eating in could be down to, well, if I have to shop for groceries and prep the meals. That's going to be, let's say an hour for grocery shopping and 45 minutes to an hour of meal prep per meal. So like that's 6 hours or so. Is it worth it to me to work for those 6 hours instead, or work for 3 hours, make way more money than it's going to cost me to buy these things? And now that becomes a better trade-off where I'm getting 3 hours of time that I don't have to do anything and I'm still coming out ahead financially. Like you will have to at some point start thinking about what is worth paying for and what is not. And sometimes it's that question of like, well, what's my hourly rate? Like income versus what it would cost. So like my ideal FI life would be like hiring a personal chef because that would meet the health goals, but then also free up the time, which is something I would love to do eventually. It's not happening right now, but that's the FI life right there.
Good to have dreams. Good to have goals.
Yes, yeah, someday. So yeah, I don't ever want to outsource my cooking to say McDonald's. That doesn't align with my health goals. But eventually outsourcing, maybe even going to the grocery store. Like maybe that's when like Instacart or something like that becomes worth it to me. Like I will save myself the 2 hours in the grocery store every Saturday where I can either work and make more or spend more time with my son or whatever it is. And that is worth the trade-off to me. So this is one of our favorite sayings, guys. And this is what I think Kara and I both believe: personal finance is personal. We're all going to have different desires, different goals, different wants, different needs. And your job as a responsible financial manager is to kind of figure out, well, what are those things I really care about? And how do I bring those in and kind of reduce the things that I don't care about? And so like, that's where you're going to save money and you're going to spend lavishly on the things that you do care about. And that's how you balance your budget. Obviously making sure you stay under budget though.
Yeah. And another one that we haven't really touched on is meal deliveries, the Blue Aprons and the HelloFresh of the world. I think those can be great options, especially if you do eat a certain way. Like if you're vegetarian or vegan, a lot of them, you can select a vegan meal kit. And that does save you that time. A lot of them too have set prices. So it's going to be $200 a month for dinner for the month. It's not going to cover all of your meals, but it is going to cover dinner. And if you're working during the day, like depending on your schedule, that may very well be worth it. And then you can supplement by grocery shopping just for breakfast and lunch. So there are a lot of options to help you meet that time saving and money saving.
Yeah. And like, just in case you weren't familiar, those meal kits, like you get the raw ingredients typically shipped to you, already portioned, already cut. And it actually can be a nice way to save a little bit if you are like making 1 or 2 portions of something. So like usually it's expensive. It's more expensive to cook for 1 than it sometimes is to cook for 4. So sometimes those meal kits can come out ahead, particularly if there's like a weird ingredient that you have to buy a lot of or a spice that you would never otherwise buy. Like sometimes you can save a little bit there, but really it's the convenience and time saving that's going to make a big difference. As you go through, you high school students, and maybe you go into college or you go into a post high school environment where you're living on your own, having roommates, if you are all cooking for yourselves, that sometimes can be more expensive than being like, you know what, let's team up here. Let's divide and conquer. Let's create a grocery budget. We'll allocate who's going to cook what night and we will share. So it's basically like cooking for a bigger family, and you get to bulk buy your stuff and you get to say like, I'm only cooking 1 night a week instead of 4. Like you save in a lot of different ways when you do that, if you can get the team to pull together and do it.
Yeah. And, I will say, piggybacking off of that, sometimes getting the more out of food than you thought you would. I wish I had a catchier way of saying that. But like, for example, I buy rotisserie chickens, which used to be $5 at the grocery store and are now $7. So
they're 10 in Maryland. So yeah.
I'm surprised because I'm in Massachusetts, so it's an expensive state, but I eat all of the chicken. My partner and I will split the chicken, and it usually makes several meals for us. And then I will boil the bones in water. I remove all of the skin and like the little tiny bits of meat, and you boil the bones and you can make broth, chicken broth with that. So now I can use that in a soup. So my $7 was paying for that meat, but it was also paying for this broth. And you can also do that with veggie scraps. So like carrot skins, onion skins, really any kind of like veggie scrap. If you save those and you boil them and then you strain it all out, now you have veggie broth. And so that's another way that you can make your dollar go further when everything is so expensive.
Yeah, that would be a prime example of one of those places where we will pay for the convenience of not having to do that. But if our money was tighter, I could see us going down those avenues, and that's something that you will experience throughout your lives. I'm going to say, those of you watching, like there will be times where you are going to feel financial stress, and you're going to have to find money in your budget or reduce your budget. Either your income took a hit or costs went up, and knowing these different levers that you can pull to help you is kind of what this is about. I hope you are never in dire financial trouble, but if you ever do find yourself in that place, find those places where you can trim as much as possible out. Like go bare bones on your budget. Food is going to be one of those big levers that you can pull to try and reduce your costs. Housing is a hard one to do things about. You're typically locked in on a mortgage or you have a contract for rent, but food is something that you can pretty much adjust each month for the most part. Your transportation is your other one that makes up the big three for most people. If you have a pre-existing health condition, that sometimes is that fourth leg of the stool that takes up a huge amount of our take-home pay if you have to cover medications each month or things like that. So those are the ones that you want to try and watch out for, and which ones can you reduce when times get tough. All right, Kara, let's see what questions the students have, and then we'll maybe wrap up today. So if you have a question you're watching, please do drop it in the comment section of YouTube. We would love to get in there and answer it for you. If you're watching the replay, still drop it in there. We would love to get in there afterwards and answer that for you as well. But I have a couple of questions that came in from my students. So Tom asked, what does it mean to shop your pantry?
Oh, a great question, Tom. So basically, this refers to the fact that you'll get buildup in your pantry. So one week you buy 3 cans of green beans and you only use 2 of them. So you have that extra can hanging out for the next month or 2, right? That's what we're talking about. Shop your pantry by looking at what's been left over from the last 6, 7 grocery store trips. And if you have something that can add up into a meal, right? So let's say you have green beans, you have 2 cans of tomatoes, you have a can of pinto beans. Well, you could make like a veggie soup, right? And so those are ingredients you don't have to buy that week because you've already paid for them 6, 7 weeks ago.
And like, this is one of those uses of AI that I really love. And there are apps for this as well, like where you can kind of go into your pantry or your freezer and be like, here's what I have. What meals can I make? But ChatGPT is actually amazing for this. Be like, I have this in my fridge and freezer and pantry. What meals can I make using those things? And then give me my grocery list of what I need to go buy. Guys, you will get an actual, like, here's the meals you should make. Here's the steps to making it. Here are the things that you don't have that you need to go get. And that is an amazing way to reduce your costs because you're using a lot of what you have already, and you're saving yourself time because, like, who has time to go, like if you knew soup off the top of your head, what if I didn't know that? And I was like, I've got these 3 ingredients. I don't feel like playing Chopped right now where I have to like somehow marry these together into a meal. That's a great use of an AI tool to help you out. Okay, so Nigel asked, and we did talk about this a little bit, and normally I try to avoid what the current situation is because I don't want to date the video, but it is such an important one. And we did talk about the tariffs. So I just want to make sure, Nigel, we got your question. Thank you for it. But yeah, the political implications on our money comes from a lot of different places. Like, it's not just about like what the taxes are on your income. There's lots of different ways that the government makes money, and tariffs is one of those. So make sure you are aware of that. And then that can be something that influences how you vote. And that's part of being an educated voter. All right. Serena asked, why is it so much more expensive for healthy food? Yes. Why do I have to pay for them to take out the harmful stuff?
This is another good question that I think has 2 answers. So the first being that actually a lot of the healthiest foods in the grocery store are the cheapest foods. So coming back to just like base vegetables and your base proteins, like those lentils, those beans, those rice, like spinach, those just raw ingredients are very, very healthy and very affordable. Where you usually see the prices starting to go up are on some of the processed foods. So like granola bars, which we love in my household, that are high protein, low sugar versus granola bars that are high sugar. And you start to see those healthier options being more expensive. And that's predominantly for 2 reasons. It has to do with production line, so where some of these ingredients are from, and how they're made. Because in pretty much every area of our lives, the easier something is to make, the lower quality it tends to be. I'm generalizing a little bit there, but when you
Mm.
think about like clothing, you have your fast fashion, your Shein, your Temu, those are made with really, really cheap materials. And then when you make something with silk, silk takes more time and energy to create the raw material of silk, and then you have to turn it into a dress. So a silk dress is going to be more expensive than a polyester dress. And it's a little bit similar in the food world. Those healthier foods sometimes are harder to create or are made with um, more expensive materials, so they have a higher price tag. But also, a little bit of this is just marketing. Sometimes brands have paid for a really nice logo or a really cute packaging. And if you look at the ingredients, it's actually the same as the less healthy or the less expensive brand. So, this is where being a smart consumer kind of comes in. You always want to read your ingredients and to see, like, are these exactly the same? And this one's charging me $2 more per box, and or learning a little bit more about the companies on the back end and where are they sourcing their ingredients from, how are they producing them, and is that what I'm actually paying for.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. And like in some cases, the cheaper ingredients are the ones that can be manufactured in a lab versus like you have to actually get something grown and picked and harvested and transported. So like there are some of those synthetic ingredients that are just cheaper to make and aren't necessarily better for us, but it makes the food cheaper. It can also increase the shelf life of it. So the longer something has a shelf life for it, the less of it you have to produce because you know it will last on the shelves versus if it's fresh, you have to keep a constant supply of it coming, which again can increase the cost because waste can happen. So yeah, it's a great question, Serena. Fresh, is going to be more expensive than prepackaged if you're comparing like apples to apples, like a can of green beans versus a bag of green beans. The can might be cheaper because again, will last longer, but it could also be more expensive because you have to have you have to add a can to it, and you have to add someone like processing, packaging that. So it depends. I think, yeah. So the last question I have, and it's a good one about like, what do I do if things aren't going well? So like if our budget for food is too high and it's hard because I don't want to compromise on my health goals. Like I don't want to trade organic for non-organic or fresh for prepackaged. Like what would you do in that scenario?
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's a big question for a lot of people, and there's no one totally bulletproof answer, I would say. But something that I have found really helpful is eating certain cuisines more than others. So, like the kind of typical American diet tends to be more expensive because our American foods are like hot dogs, hamburgers, French fries. It's these processed, fairly unhealthy foods. Those are sort of our cultural foods. And even we have regional foods, like in the South, they have collard greens and fried chicken, still somewhat unhealthy. Eating, I eat a lot of Asian based foods, which tend to be very, very affordable and very healthy. So, like Japan is one of the blue zones in the world where people live significantly longer than the average lifespan. And that's because in Japan, they eat a lot of fish, they eat a lot of vegetables, they eat a lot of rice. And
Mm.
so that's really what I've modeled my diet after because it's easy for me to digest with my Crohn's disease and it's healthier. So if you're looking at foods that maybe are healthy but are very expensive, like, you know, a lot of alternatives. So, like, dairy free products, which I buy a fair amount of, are always more expensive than dairy. um,
Yes,
but tend,
it's more expensive to take that stuff out than to put it in.
yes, exactly. Maybe step away from thinking about things as individual items and think about shifting into eating in a more regional, whether it's Japan, whether it's Mediterranean, whether it's Middle Eastern, that have these base items that the culture is doing a lot with. And so just as an example, like in India, which is one of my favorite cuisines, and there's a million different ways to eat Indian food, but you'll notice a lot of Indian food ingredients are the same. It's a lot of chickpeas, it's a lot of rice, it's a lot of like dates, and they're just doing different things with them. So also adding in different spices to just change up the flavor palette of the same foods that you might be buying, you can stay really healthy, you can still enjoy it, and you can save money.
Awesome advice, Kara. All right, let's find out the answer to our trivia question, and then we'll get Kara's number one piece of advice for you guys. $151 million of avocados. Man, that's a lot of guacamole that's being consumed during
That's
Cinco de Mayo.
wild. I wrote down 10 million. I was way off.
Yeah, I wasn't guessing that either, but hopefully you all had a bit of fun in your classrooms trying to figure out how close it was. Was anyone even close to 150 million? Okay, so Kara, before we wrap up today, I want to know, what is your number one piece of advice for teens when it comes to building wealth? It can be related to our food budgets. It can be related to any other part of personal finance that you found particularly important and you want to share.
My number one piece of advice is something I've been doing now for 11 years, and it is separate high yield savings accounts for separate money goals. So I have my emergency fund in one savings account, and I have my travel fund in another. And just having separate accounts for separate goals helps keep me organized. So I know how much I need to save to take my trip to, I'm currently saving for a trip to Alaska. So I'm like, okay, I know how much I have saved, how much further I have to go. And it makes sure that I don't accidentally spend my emergency fund money on my trip to Alaska, right? I'm not kind of begging or borrowing from myself because I'm confused. I understand exactly where everything is. So that's my number one piece of advice.
Yeah, I love that too. And shout out to Ally Bank for being like a bank that lets you have multiple accounts. So like for me, like and my wife, we have one checking account there, but we have, I think, 10 savings accounts you can have with Ally. And yeah, each one's got its own kind of bucket. So like there's a emergency fund, there's a car replacement fund, there's our taxes for our business potentially in there. There's a vacation fund, like there's all the different funds in there. And it's our Christmas fund is another one. So like a little bit going in there for Christmas each year. It's a great way of just making sure that you have your goals being met. And yeah, you're not just looking at this big pot of money and being like, how much of that's for my vacation again? And then pulling it out. Love that piece of advice. All right, before we wrap up, where can we find you, Kara? We've hinted a couple of times at Instagram. So that is the @WeBravelyGo. Is there anywhere else we can find you?
Yeah, I'm on TikTok, same handle @WeBravelyGo. I'm on YouTube. So if you're watching this on YouTube, come find me there. That is just @BravelyGo, or you can type in my name, Kara Perez. And I have a website if you want to go real old school, and that's bravelygo.co.
Got it right there. And don't forget your book. You got a book.
Oh my God, I do have a book. Oh, thank you for reminding me. I do have a book. You can get it at the library. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places. And that is called Money for Change.
Mm-hmm. So how to reduce waste, build wealth, and create a better future for all. So Kara, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really eye-opening conversation about money, and hopefully you all learned something that you can take into the future or bring into your household right now and see maybe can you start helping your household to start doing not necessarily better, but trying other different things. See, can you reduce the cost of food, make it a game, and practice for when you're doing this yourself in the future. Have a great rest of your day, all. Talk to you soon.